At the dark end of the street.
All right, I believe we are live.
That's where
Welcome
we
everybody
walk.
to the Ghost Who Walks Facebook Live panel discussion featuring our director Cody Stokes and the cast and some crew members from the film. My name is David Johnson. I'm one of the executive producers on the film. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them down in the comment section. We'll try to get through them as we go on through the discussion. This is a big day for our film as we officially launched on Netflix today. So please go watch the film and tell your friends to do the same. Every view counts. The more people that watch the film, the better chance the Ghost Who Walks has to play another year on Netflix. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator today. Chad Harbald is the writer and director of Long Nights, Short Mornings, which premiered at the 2016 South by Southwest Film Festival. He recently produced I'm beating back, I guess, Till Death, starring Jason Sudeikis, which is currently in post-production. He also produced Most Beautiful Island, Villains, Depraved, Green's Premature. His features and shorts have screened at film festivals around the world, including Sundance, Tribeca, Rotterdam, BFI London, and a bunch of other places. He's a Film Independent Spirit Award nominee, an IFP fellow, and today he's our moderator. So Chad, I'm going to take you guys take it away. I'm muting out.
Hey everybody, my name's Chad. I'm glad to be here. I'm here with the cast and crew of The Ghost Who Walks. I want to introduce the writer and director, Cody Stokes, and the cast of the film. Garland Scott is here, Frank Mosley, Alexia Rasmussen, Natalie Randall, Peter Mayer, Curtis York, DP Michael Lockridge, and stunt coordinator Brian Peters. Really happy to have all you guys here.
Thanks.
I want to start things off with Cody and just to tell us a little bit about the origins of the film and what it's about and how you came up with how the film germinated in your mind.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I first came up with the idea of the film when I was living in New York, and my daughter, she was born up there, and I was traveling a lot because my day-to-day job is as a commercial director. So I was just away a lot, and I started thinking about that as a new parent, what that meant to be away from your kid and how that affected their life and my own life. And I knew I wanted to make a film about that, but I also knew to make a film that reflected my personal life wasn't a film. It wasn't as interesting as something else. So I knew I wanted to take that theme and that idea and kind of elevate it and make it something more exciting. And that's really kind of how this film became, it's a film about fatherhood, but it's wrapped up in kind of a crime genre packaging, so to speak. So that's really kind of how it started. And it really started with characters, like very small, specific scenes I knew I wanted to have. I knew I wanted a really filthy Santa Claus in it. I love movies that take place at Christmas, but have nothing to do with Christmas. And so, I don't want to talk too much about the end, obviously, but this movie really started with an ending and worked backwards from there. And I originally, like I said, I wrote this in New York with kind of the idea of shooting in New York. And after some moves and some, different things, I moved back to the Midwest and ultimately realized that I wanted to shoot the film on my home front, so to speak, and really kind of make this a little more about a Rust Belt city and anywhere America. And so that, over some time, that transition, and that's how we ended up with the movie we did.
That's really interesting and kind of goes to what I love about the movie, and that it certainly takes place within the kind of crime thriller canon, but is very much a movie about characters and small moments and it has a propulsive pace, but then takes the time to get to know all of these people in this, large ensemble cast. And I want to get to them in a second, but I'm curious as to when was there a specific moment when you realized that this story you wanted to tell, or this character, these moments that you had were going to take place within the context of a genre of a crime thriller?
I think I guess from day one, once I knew I wanted to put it on paper, it always was within the world of these criminals. But it started as a short, actually. And so as I kind of built it out into a feature, you know, that's when it really became about digging into the characters a little bit more, because I had time to do that. So it was always within the world. I think what happened is, as I wrote it, then I realized, I need to really think about some of these very specific genre elements and how to implement them in the story, so that there is that familiarity to people who are fans of this very specific genre. And I didn't want to betray that, and I didn't want to completely throw that out the window. So it was kind of after I'd already started writing that I went back and started to formulate that, but made sure I left room for some of the character pieces I was curious in exploring.
Cool. And I want to open this up to the cast. I'll start with Garland Scott, who plays Nolan, the lead in really magnetic performance. It just really impressive performance, Garland. You really carry the movie, and it's a real kind of star-making role, in my opinion. And I want to ask you how you came to the project, and what your approach was to the character, and what first excited you about it.
Sure. One, thank you for the kind words. It means a lot. I got, just like everyone else, I auditioned for it. I ended up meeting Cody after my audition. He came into town, and we had a conversation over coffee, and we talked about the script and the character, and why he wrote the story, and how it was very important for him to, you know, while he was on his journey, you know, doing commercials and everything, he spent a lot of time away from his family. And the mirroring of that, the story, the core of the story being about a father who wants to just connect with his family, his daughter especially, it really drew me to it. And like you said, those small moments, those really small moments in the story really helped bring everything to life. It really stood out to me. By that time, I didn't read the actual script, though. I just read the sides.
Oh, wow.
So after that conversation, Cody said, hey, why don't you just read the script? And if you like it, let me know and we'll talk some more. And that was the beginning of my involvement in this process.
Great. And what was was there a particular kind of in to the character, or a moment in the story that you felt that you connected to and understood who this guy was? I mean, speaking of the kind of genre, you know, the blending of the kind of genre and naturalism, I mean, that has to be in the performances too. Is that something that you were aware of at all, or was it more that you were just, you know, kind of connecting with the actors in each moment?
Well, I think when you take a film that has so many character relationships, you have to treat every scene as its own individual thing, because the sum is, you know, the small parts create the whole. And I feel like a lot of times when people look at these scripts, they take it all in one big swoop. They don't pay attention to these really small moments. Every character relationship is very important and very specific. So that's where I started. Each individualistic, specific relationship with each character that Nolan encountered. And I worked my way through there. So being that they were very different, it gave me a handle on him as a real person. You know, you're different from when you're with your best friend versus an acquaintance versus a family member. You know, they're all different. You can have the same conversation, but there'll be differences. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So those moments, I was allowed to actually breathe, you know, and say, okay, I can see where I can change a lot from moment to moment to moment, but still live in the same world. And that made me excited because it gave me room to stretch and breathe as an actor. And also, I actually had a few conversations with people who actually were locked up for a while. So it's long-term, like 14 years, 6 years. And they gave me insight onto, you know, into the feelings of when you get out. Instead of just being locked up, a lot of films start with this hard-nosed, hard-edged character. after, you know, all the things he's been through, not his tunnel vision on the way trying to get out of it and him wanting to be away from it and begin something new. So I started with their experiences with when they got out of jail, how they felt, you know. And it was one guy I spoke to who said when he just got out after 14 years, he went into a gas station and he stood there for 45 minutes in the gas station. And I was like, that's interesting, like 45 minutes in the gas station. He said, yes, you never realize that when you're locked down for so long that a gas station has everything you need. A gas station. People take this for granted all the time. I was like, wow, that's a very interesting thing. And it's something that you can easily overlook and not add. And I felt that that was very important, those small things, the nuances to add to this character that could easily be lost, because I maintained some level of humanity, you know, with Nolan. I felt that that's what I tried to do. And hopefully it came through.
That's great. Yeah, of course it did. Frank, I'll go to you. You're also a producer on the film, so I'm curious as to how you came to it, both from that standpoint and also from a character standpoint. I know, you know, we had talked about this, and, you know, us in the indie world are used to very kind of trading in naturalism, and you got to really kind of put on a character for this, and a voice, and you know, a physical transformation and all of that stuff. So I'm sure that was an interesting and unique process, if you can tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and then right when I get the question, the dog starts going nuts. So bear with me just for 1 second. But yeah, so basically it was, thank you. Yeah, so basically what happened was Cody had the script that he'd been telling me about back when it was a short, and that was years back. I mean, I want to say that was maybe back in 2015. And he had just told me the idea just as like a scene. And without, as Cody said, giving the ending away, it's a very intimate, small scene, but there's all this, the atmosphere of crime and doom is all around it. And I was just really struck by that idea. And then he started developing it more and more. And just as friends, he'd be like, hey, I got this side character. I got these things that I'm thinking about and filling in the pieces of the world. And there's a character that could be fun for you to play, but I had no idea what that was going to be. And so in preparation with Cody, as like the thing became a reality, basically it was like how to do something that in a genre film feels at home, but then kind of break down this character who's always performing to stay alive. And then you see him when he's a different person with the only person he really loves in the last half of the film, who he also has some very intense change with, without giving anything away. So it was trying to find that balance to where it's like what starts off as the fool and the clown becomes a real person, and you see hopefully different edges of that character, which is something, to your point, Chad, you brought up, and something I think Cody did so well with this whole thing, is that every character has moments of range, or you get to see little bits of nuance in a moment that you don't expect. And so that was a lot of fun to play with. And we also just talked about kind of, you know, when you're doing a sidekick kind of character, you're in the shadow of everything that's kind of come before you. So it's like, how do you do a thing that's both kind of a homage to that in its own way, but then also put a spin on it and make it your own and make it different? You know, I could say Beetlejuice was a big influence on this performance as much as, you know, Joe Pesci or something. So there's like a lot of things within one thing, but then trying to still make it grounded and real, you know.
That's great. That I see the Beetlejuice. Yeah, I get it. I wanted to mention that Gil Darnell has joined us, who plays Donnie in the film. Hi, Gil. I'm Chad. I'm moderating for us, and I'll go to you right now and just ask you how the project came to you. And Gil plays Donnie is one of the villains in the film, and one of the most intriguing parts of that character to me is how he's very kind of mysterious in the film, but everything he does feels very informed, and like there is a wealth of kind of backstory to him that we don't always see, but we feel. And I was wondering, you know, how you and Cody built that, and yeah, I'll leave it there for you to tell us.
Villain, what? Villain, I'm misunderstood, man. Misunderstood.
Yes, right, of course.
I think I submitted myself on tape from memory, and then I just basically found out, hey, you know, you're going to St. Louis, and did we film it in November or something? October, November.
Yeah.
And then yeah, it's just like I love it. Cody as a director is my dream director, because he finds a great cast, and they just basically, you know, let me do my thing, and then if he thought I could improve on what I was doing, then he'd make suggestions. But basically, he just trusted us so much, and even the things like you know, there's the kitchen scene, the threatening kitchen scene with Alexis. You know, we're meant to kiss, but I thought, you know, we just came up organically with this thing where it's more threatening if I don't actually kiss her. I think I just kiss her on the forehead in the end, and it's ended up being more threatening. But yeah, no, he's just a good human being, a good director, and it's just a joy, you know. I love this project.
Oh, that's great. Alexia, I'll go to you and ask you to start out with, again, how the project came to you, and what your kind of initial excitement about it, and your approach to your character, who's, you know, very much stuck between a rock and a hard place here, and you know, has the priority of her daughter, but is excited to see, even if a bit trepidatious, to see Nolan return to her life, but wanting to protect her daughter. How did the project come to you, and what was your approach?
I was very fortunate to work with Frank on a job a while ago that brought us pretty close. And Frank is the person who sort of referred me ultimately to Cody. And then Cody and I had a meeting. I read the script. Cody and I had a meeting, and I was like, this guy is really down to earth. He seems to know what he's doing. He's got experience, which is always really nice. I mean, I think a lot of us who traffic in the indie world work with a lot of first-time directors, and sometimes that's awesome, like first-time feature, you know, big stuff. And sometimes that's awesome, and sometimes that's terrifying. So I felt reassured from the get-go that he had the wherewithal to lead. And yeah, and I was attracted to the part because, frankly, you know, I'm a pretty basic lady, and I don't get offered, you know, the gangster's wife very often. So I was pretty like, all right. But also it was nice that it didn't come with, you know, it didn't necessitate maybe some of the harder hitting character work that like Frank's part did. I didn't have to have big acrylic nails or an accent or anything like that. It felt very grounded in reality, but it was also a great opportunity to sort of travel through a medium that I hadn't, in terms of the genre and just, yeah, the ensemble and the love story. There's just very many dynamics to this film, as we discussed earlier. It has a sort of twinkly, like a dirty twinkle to it.
That's a good quote. We need to keep that, I think.
Yeah.
Dirty twinkle.
The dirty twinkle.
And I could feel, you know, this woman's plight, because she, when you work really hard to move past something, I think anybody who's faced any kind of adversity in their life, I think we can all safely say now everybody has faced some adversity in their life as of today. But you know, you lock yourself down pretty tight and make your decision, and you go and you commit. And when something returns, a ghost, to remind you of a feeling or a way you were, it can be really disturbing and can create a dissonance. And, you know, her decision, you know, of which future, I mean, she has a known quantity in one hand and a complete sort of gamble on the other. So she's very brave to do both, I think. So that was sort of my idea, because I kind of waffled. I was like, which way does she really want to go? You know, I have to pick a side. But it was nice that Cody didn't require me to do that. Again, like Garland was saying, like, you're in the scene with the person you're in the scene with. You know, you choose that person in the moment. And that's, yeah, I wouldn't say that's my approach, but yeah, it was also just very good direction. We had a lot of rehearsal, which is like, what a thing you can have. So that was really wonderful. Like Gil was talking about, there's like space for play and change, and that's a gift all the time.
Yeah, I didn't know that you guys were able to do that, which is great and very rare on an indie film, especially one that's not shot in New York and LA where all the actors live. So that's very interesting. Natalie, I'll go to you. I mean, speaking of, you know, these kind of, you know, the gang, as Lexi was saying, the gangster's wife, but it's not that, and your part in a similar way, like kind of would be a trope in another movie, but in this one is complex and interesting and unique and your own and has personality and a history to it. Can you talk about your character and your approach to the film and how you joined the project?
Yeah, so I also did a self-tape, and this is one of the first movies I'd ever done. So I was very nervous to come into this, but thankfully Cody was so nice, so helpful, gave great direction. And now, like, looking at the movie, and you know, my friends have seen it and some other people in the first time we had the screening in Brooklyn, I didn't necessarily take my part too comedic when I was doing it, but every time I have someone watch it, or you know, they're looking at it, it's kind of like, in this movie that is such a thriller, you know, and dramatic, you kind of get like 10-15 minutes where you get to laugh a little bit, and then it's back to business. So I feel like my character, you know, I'm not gonna say it's like a you know, super comic relief, but it's kind of like, you know, you just get a moment away from all the drama and everything.
Well, she kind of gets to like be the strange kind of voice of reason, where she's just like, these people are all crazy. Like, what are you guys doing? She has a really great spirit, I think, and the anarchy that kind of is going on at that point in the movie is very exciting. Peter, I'll go to you, and as you know, in the kind of classic tradition of you know, heavies or you know, goons for the bad guy, but you and Curtis both imbue your characters with again, like a kind of history and a sort of camaraderie and just unique characters. I mean, you know, there's just so many in a lesser film, so many of these characters would just be kind of one note or afterthoughts, and everyone in this movie and that's in this panel here is so richly kind of defined, and I think that's what makes the movie stand out. It is a true ensemble, I think. And but Peter, can you tell us how you came to the movie and what your thoughts were on your character?
Several weeks before we started shooting, Cody and I met in Joni Tackett's office. Joni is the casting director. And we intended just to get together one morning for, you know, a few minutes just to touch base and talk about the script and the character and, you know, just kind of get to know each other a little bit. And we wound up talking for 3 hours. We both had things we needed to do, but we were so fascinated by the conversation. We quickly discovered we both are obsessed basically with movies. And we began discussing our favorite films and actors and directors we admired and why films work or why they don't work. And we really had a great conversation. We also discovered that we knew some people in common. We both had sort of similar educational backgrounds. And it turned out that Cody's advisor, when he'd gone to the university to study filmmaking, was a guy that I knew. And he told me a great story about the guy's he's a terrific cinematographer. He's from Eastern Europe. And Cody, I don't know if Cody remembers, but he told me a great story about how he got him to approve his schedule. He sort of pulled the wool over his eyes. Anyway, we wound up having this fabulous conversation. And from that, I realized that it became very apparent that Cody understood a principal thing, which is that preparation is everything in this. Lexi talked about working with a lot of indie directors, particularly some first-time directors. And many times things kind of go a cropper when they just haven't done the preparation. I realized from our conversation that Cody knew exactly what he was doing. He had put in the work to really make an outstanding product. And I had the impression that this was going to be a special production, and it was going to be great working with him, and that turned out to be the case. Both he and Dan took great care of the cast and the crew. We had a great atmosphere on set. Everybody had the feeling that they were contributing to something that was going to be top quality. And I think that's what we've got. I think this is it's a production. It's a movie that I'm really proud to be part of, and I'm very grateful that I got to be in it and got to work with everybody.
That's great. Thank you. And Curtis, I'll go to you and ask you how you became part of this project and what your approach to your character was, and also I believe you mentioned you're a St. Louis local. Is that correct? And I'd also love to hear about the filmmaking community of that this movie was made around.
Yeah. I'm born and raised here in St. Louis. Just like Garland, I auditioned, didn't do a self-tape, but I auditioned for the role in front of Joni Taggart, and I didn't really think I was going to get it because I'm all over the place sometimes. I'm so busy, but I didn't think I was going to get it, and I was really happy that I did. And what I liked about being a part of it was Cody and Dan and everybody else on set made you feel like you belong there, and like you had a role to play, no matter how small your part was, and that felt great, to experience it and get to talk to the director, like another person and be answered back, instead of shooed away like that happens on set sometimes. Cody's not like that. Dan's not like that. Frank's not like that. These guys are professionals, but they're still very, very nice people, which is hard to come by sometimes in this business. And the St. Louis film industry, we've always tried to keep, to get films here and be in the process of movie making. It's been hard. It's been hard to get roles here. So I'm very appreciative of getting this part and working with these guys. And but I love watching the movie. I've watched it so many times because I like, oh, there's that spot. I've been in there, and that's that street. And you go crazy when you're from that town. Like people in LA do. They just be like, oh yeah, I walk down that street all the time, and they're watching the Avengers or something. It's just crazy. And it was a lot of fun. And when my friends watch it, they're like, man, is that store? I'm like, yeah, that's that store over on the hill. And so it's pretty cool that a lot of my friends and people that I know recognize that this is St. Louis, and we, we're in the scene with, we're in the spotlight for movie making, which is cool. And I want to thank everybody I work with too, man. You guys were super, super great people to work with.
You were great, man.
Good working with you.
Thanks so much, man. You were awesome.
So Chad, one thing to note just on the St. Louis front. So most people that were involved with the film, not everybody, but a lot of people had some tie back to the city. And that was we shot in December. So it was we wrapped the 23rd of December. So it was leading up to Christmas. So we did, that was something we considered. We wanted to know this was not an easy film to make. And the budget wasn't excessive by any means. So, having people with ties who can maybe stay with family or just had a desire or reason to come back was a really big part. But Curtis and Peter were both local here actors. I mean, acting other places as well, but I was able to meet with them in person ahead of time. And then I know, Natalie, you're from here originally. I
Yeah,
didn't misremember that, right?
Yeah, no, I'm from Springfield, Illinois, but my sister lives in St. Louis, so I was able to stay with her and, you know, have a weekend with her, which was amazing.
Yeah. So that was something we used to bring a lot of people in, and that was not exclusively why we hired people by any means, but it was always a nice perk to see that kind of connective thread when making a film in a market that's so small, I guess.
Yeah, and for the out of towners, like, you know, Garland and Frank and Lexi, I'm curious as to what your experience was shooting in St. Louis. If you had been there before or shot there before, or how was it different or interesting based on other kind of on location shoots you've done? I know that, you know, I've shot all over this country and a few others too, and it's always, you get to know the place really well by the end, I feel like.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and I think the other thing is, to your point, Peter, with Cody is so prepared. So I was getting, you know, pictures of some of these locations or getting ideas for scenes or storyboards or whatever else, like in prep for the scene. So like, I feel like what was great was by the time you got there, like, oh yeah, that's pretty much how you described it. Or yeah, that's exactly how I saw it in my head, the way you pitched it. So the prep made it easy just to fall in. And then, I mean, it was just like Curtis said, everybody involved was there because they wanted to be. They wanted to tell the story. They were there for Cody and because they wanted to be a part of telling that story. And so if everybody's in the same spirit like that, it makes it a hell of an easier time to make a movie, you know?
I have a question from the audience about the cinematography, so I'll go to Michael Lockridge. What was your and Cody's approach to this film, and, you know, what were your stylistic references? What were you trying to achieve? It has a kind of interesting kind of stylized naturalism, as like Michael Mann would say, and I think that there's something whether or not that was a reference or not, there's some positive comparisons to some of those films, like Thief in particular. So I'm curious as to what your guys' approach was, and there's also a couple really cool one-shot scenes in the film as well. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for us, kind of what you were talking about in terms of having like a stylistic naturalism to it was important, you know, and we also felt the need to kind of like lean into our limitations a little bit, kind of make them our choices and try to, you know, take advantage of St. Louis and the ability to, you know, close down a street in the middle of the night. You couldn't necessarily do that on the same budget in Los Angeles or New York. And, you know, and obviously we talked a lot about these like longer shots, kind of one shots, and we would rehearse them and try to do as much as we can, but also like keeping that kind of kinetic energy, you know, so that it wouldn't get boring. And, you know, they were challenging for sure. But to speak to everyone else's point, you know, Cody had what we called the Bible, which was a book that was about this thick, storyboarded, everything, the script, the blocking of every scene. And while we didn't necessarily always adhere to that exactly, it was kind of like our fallback on, like, if we ever felt like we were getting lost, or we had that core to jump off of. But sometimes, you know, you get into a location, you're like, oh, we got to change it up a little bit. It'll look better if we go from here. And, you know, he was always open to kind of like being flexible in that way. And one of the stronger, I guess, like stylistic choices we did is we thought a lot about, you know, Nolan's mental state and how do we translate like his mental state, you know, in the way that the camera moves. And, you know, so we tried to have like much more smoother movements and like kind of steady cam feel when we felt like Nolan felt like things were going well for him. And when things were not going well for him, things got a little muddier, and sometimes, you know, the camera was like all over the place, you know, and, you know, trying to give that energy of like how he's feeling inside about like, you know, how his journey is going, whether things are going well or terribly for him. I think that answers your question. But we also, you know, shared lots of photos back and forth. And yeah, I found aesthetically, we just were kind of into a lot of the same things. So there wasn't, we didn't need to have a ton of discussion because we both kind of just liked the same thing and gravitated towards the same things. So that made it, you know, almost a shorthand where like I could look to him, and just by the way that he's kind of looking at something, I could tell that he didn't like what I was doing and try to adjust it. And, you know, you could just tell, you just look at you like, no, yeah, you're right. That's wrong. Let's try something like this. Let's try to mess it up a little bit more, you know, and try to have, you know, kind of an interesting grittiness that still looked really cool.
Well, also it's important to note, Michael and I had a couple years of shooting commercials together leading up to this, none of which look like the movie we made, obviously, for commercial reasons. But,
yeah,
you know, so there's a lot of time to get to know each other on set, to know how we work, both how I know how he works, he knows how I work. So we didn't have to talk about a lot of things. And then like the few grounding principles he was talking about, one of the big things I was concerned with, and this plays into why there's these longer takes or oneers, was this is a movie about a man running out of time. So I wanted time to feel very palpable on screen. And so for me, if a shot could continue without cuts, it should always continue without cuts. And that was something that Michael and I talked about a lot ahead of time, and even kind of built out a rig so that he could operate as such to make sure that we could keep going as long as possible without kind of wearing down Michael too much.
In many ways, this movie was kind of like when we were shooting those other commercials, we would be like, man, I would really like it to look like this or to do this, you know, and so this, when we got to do this movie, it was this freedom of being like, let's do it. Let's do all of these things that we've talked about that we're both like really into, and go for it, because there's nobody really to tell us no.
That's a good feeling. I want to go into, I want to talk to Brian Peters, who's the stunt coordinator. This movie has, again, like, this is difficult to accomplish on an indie, but this movie has some really cool stunt sequences and some really propulsive action in it. And I just wanted you to talk about your approach to, with Cody and the actors and your stunt team accomplishing these things safely, but while still making them look dangerous, which is, I know, your number one job. And I think we can particularly maybe talk about, without spoiling too much, but the really great scene that takes place in the bathroom with Garland and Curtis.
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep into that, obviously, but I just want to echo some of the things that the cast and crew have been saying about working on indie films. I came into this one kind of late in the process. The producer Dan was in communication with a friend of mine who was another stunt coordinator. He's coordinating Chicago PD up here in Chicago. Since it was taking place in St. Louis, he said, hey, would you help these guys out? So I came in kind of late in the process. And when I met with Cody and I spoke to him, everything that he and Michael just said about the way that the film was going to be shot was so vital. That was so, the information was so important to how we lay out a stunt scene. Once I knew that, let me put it this way, stunt coordinator comes onto an independent film and there are three things that they're immediately worried about. One, does the director know what he wants in a stunt? Does the director of photography know how to shoot action? A lot of independent filmmakers don't. And a lot of times independent film actors don't really have the physicality to perform some of the stunts that need to be performed. All three of those things, to my end, were very positive. I had a DP that knew how to shoot. I had a director who had a clear vision, and I had actors who, they did
all of their own stuff. I mean, in very rare occasions did we need a stunt double. And the beautiful thing about that scene in the bathroom that we're speaking so mysteriously about is that the director, Cody, gave us an entire day of rehearsal, not with stunt doubles, but with the actors, which is pretty much unheard of, even on a feature film. To have that time with those actors to work out the details of that stunt sequence was just, that was incredible. It was an incredible move by Cody, and it shows in the film. But yeah, it just, to echo what Peter was saying about how much preparation Cody did, it made my job so much easier. And to have Michael and Cody on the same page together constantly, it just made every sequence so easy to lay out. It took out all the guesswork in prepping for the stunt sequences. I think all of the actors did an incredible job of that. They had such stamina, especially in some of the running scenes, because this is very much a running movie. It's definitely a moving film.
I had trouble keeping up with some of them.
Yeah.
Can I just throw something? Can I just say something about that? The fight scene between Curtis and Garland that Brian choreographed. That's one of the best and most realistic fight scenes I've ever seen in any movie. It really is. I mean, it's just astounding.
I'm actually watching it right now. It's on the TV on Netflix.
And just so people know, I mean, it's very rare to have, well, frankly, to have producers allow you to have the time to rehearse something like that, especially with the actors on, a day off. And it also takes actors that are game to do that. So it takes persistence from the director to, say that that's a necessary thing. And it obviously paid off in the movie. I want to take some stuff from the audience, because some questions are piling up here. Noah asked, this film was very unique in the amount of intense, convincing emotion in the scenes. How did Cody and the actors approach those scenes? I think this could be an opportunity, Cody, to talk about the rehearsal process. Again, not something that happens very often on an independent film, unfortunately, which is kind of sad, because that's really when you need it the most, because you're shooting things faster than a studio movie would shoot. And so having the time in the room before is very helpful. But Cody, I'd love to hear your answer to that.
Sure. Well, I think that the rehearsal statement may be relative to some of the people's parts, because I know other people didn't get that. It depended on the day, and there were certain scenes we built out in a way where, just because of location moves and whatnot, we had more time there. And I think everyone would always say you'd always love more rehearsal. But I think for me, if the actors don't have what they need, like everyone's very kindly made it sound like I had a great plan or something. I certainly had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I think they're being overly kind about it. And I think the one thing that I learned just from years of commercial work and starting as an editor first is, to be a good director, it's about, casting the right people, and then just staying out of the way unless there's something that needs to be said for whatever reason. And it's usually, from my point of view, mostly technical in a lot of ways, because I think everyone that got cast, I cast them because they brought something that was exactly what I had hoped to find. And so when it got to set, we had a lot of conversations ahead of time. And then with the rehearsal part of it, obviously for the stunts, the one fight scene in particular, that was kind of one of the selling points of the movie itself. And I know early on, just talking to Dan, my producing partner, the guy who's kind of my right hand in all of this, he and I, just like Michael, have been making commercials for years. So he had been hearing me talk on and on about that. And while I was able to maybe cut some other areas, he was able to make sure that we had that day of rehearsal. And then as far as like some of the scenes with the other actors, is I feel like I wish I could have given them more time to rehearse. I know, Peter in particular probably had some of the brunt of lack of rehearsals, where things were getting down to wire and we were just like, hey, I need you to hit the mark and do it exactly right now. So I feel like it was misguided, but I feel like misappropriated sometimes, but I feel like the skill of all the actors really, that's what came to the forefront anyway. So, and I think for me also, like, it matters what they think. If an actor doesn't feel comfortable with something they're doing, and there's a lot of very uncomfortable things in this movie, the performance isn't going to work, and you can't edit around that. So even like I know, like some of the actors like Natalie and Frank, the first day he showed up, we had an opportunity with the location to add a scene. So I called him. I said, hey, I know you're flying in today, but would you mind doing this scene the moment you land? So he landed and went through, I don't remember, it was like an hour plus of makeup to get all his scars and whatnot. So, you know, a lot of people were really willing to be thrown into the mix. I have shit, I'm visiting, sorry.
I thought you were going to talk about another scene that Frank was uncomfortable with, but
well, no, but let's talk about that for a second, because I think, you know, there is a lot of there's a lot of physical action in the film, but there's also a lot of nudity, and that's a similar type of vulnerability for an actor. And I think the amount of trust that was put into me by the cast to do those things was great. And I think those kind of conversations, I tried to be as thorough and beforehand as possible with like storyboards and just being open about what their comfort levels were, and also what was the purpose of this in a scene anyway. And so I think that was equally as important. I mean, there's a scene in the film that takes place in a brothel, and there's a lot of nude people in the scene, and it was hours and hours of shooting with people being naked while shooting. And it was one of those things, like those things really worry me as a director, because I've been on sets where that's been handled poorly, and that's a really traumatic thing to go through. And I think that my job as a director, whether it's just you know, a straight read from a page or something like a stunt or nudity on screen, is to be the protector of everyone's you know, mental state and performance and just time on set. These are movies, they're supposed to be fun to make, and so no one should ever feel bad while making them. And so that was something I always thought about. And usually people have better ideas than I do, right? So if you let actors do their job, if you let the crew do their job, it really just makes the movie that you thought you were going to make much better. And I was a beneficiary of that for sure.
It's great. And another question from the audience, Noah asks, who did the credit music? It sounds like a gospel piece of some kind. And I'll open that up to the music in general in the film, which obviously there's some Christmas music and things like that, but it really contributes to the style and feels very specific. And again, a very difficult thing to do on a budget. So I'd love to hear your approach to that, and with that maybe it was you and your editor or music supervisor or whatever, but how did you choose the music for the film?
Yeah, so I mean, like, well, I co-edited the film with Nick Gardner, so I was also the editor, and we didn't have a music supervisor. So even going into shooting, I had a lot of music pre-selected, and there was that certain kind of Motown iconic Christmas vibe that I wanted to get, mixed in with more contemporary sounds as well, obviously. And I think that, well, I thought I was real clever because I found all these really obscure Christmas tracks that all ended up being owned by like Sony or something. So, I mean, that's the words of the wise for independent filmmakers, is like music supervisors are worth the money that you have to pay them, because they ensure you a lot of heartache on the back end. And I owe a lot of credit to Dan Gardner, our producer, because there was one track in particular that I had in mind for the film ahead of time, and we fought to the bitter end to get that track, and he was able to get that for us. But other than that one particular track, which is The Dark End of the Street, we had to kind of change out every single thing. And one cool thing about just the local community is that there's a lot of great music that is close to that kind of like, you know, St. Louis is a big blues city, so there's a lot of performers that can do things slightly in the ilk of you know, that Motown sound if you ask them. And so and my brother is a local musician as well, so he was really helpful, and so is Dan's brother, and just saying, hey, we need tracks, like let's put the word out. And so a lot of people sent in a lot of stuff for us to work with, and then we had some relationships with post music houses through the commercial work we did. And I think, I mean, this film wouldn't have been made without years of making commercials ahead of this, because a lot of the favors and the goodwill we had to make this film came from, you know, repeat business, so to speak, a lot of loyalty with other people. So it was a sound that I really knew I wanted. We got kind of brought to our knees with the reality of the world and how money works, and then just dug our way out of it. Yeah. And then as far as the soundtrack or the score, you know, once we were in post, I just knew we needed we had found all these tracks, but I knew we needed a score to kind of drive in between the incidental kind of Christmas vibe. And so Nima Fakara, we found him through searching through some other people, and he at that time hadn't himself. He was doing mostly video game work and really big video games, but I think he was interested in getting a little more film work. He had some, and so he came in and really, I think, delivered in a big way on this project as well.
That's great. And another question from the audience, from Amy. Does Cody have any scenes in the film that he might not have thought much about during shooting, but became his favorite in editing? I think we're talking about some of these small moments that we've said kind of ended up, I think, defining the film in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, there was no scene I didn't think a lot. I mean,
sure, yeah.
Every scene was hard fought to get. There was definitely scenes that I'd wished I was able to get that for whatever reason we weren't able to get. But I think, this is not news to filmmakers, but to people watching this, every filmmaker, when you make a film, there's 3 films, right? There's the film you write that you think you're going to make. There's the film you make in production, and then there's the film that comes out in the edit. And I think a lot of times by the time a filmmaker or a filmmaking team get to the edit, there's an element of just being heartbroken. And maybe it's because it took a long time or it took a lot of work, but by the time I got to the end of this, the movie I saw was the only movie I could ever see. And that was a really rewarding experience. And I've probably seen this film, having cut it and edited, I've seen it an obscene amount of times. And, I could sit all day and say, oh, I see this and that's a shortcoming, blah, blah, blah. But I really fall in love with it. And there's parts, specifically performances too, that happen. I mean, there's a scene with Frank and Garland in the bathroom. There's a lot of things that happen in bathrooms, I guess, in this movie, but the scene in particular, it's beautiful to watch because they work so emotionally well on their own. But I also get taken back to those moments, and like getting to shoot any movie for any filmmaker is a gift, and then getting to finish it is a gift, and then getting people to watch it is most of the time unbelievable. So the fact that those moments have made it all the way to a finished film that will be able to be consumed on Netflix has been, it's really kind of a dream come true in that way. And hopefully we'll all go do it again. But there's not one scene to call out, I guess, because everyone brought something special. So everything kind of came to life in a way that I might not have had expected up front.
Speaking of doing it again, Zachary asks, do you want to continue making films in St. Louis? Like, would you shoot there again?
Sure. I mean, I would certainly shoot more films in St. Louis. I mean, I'm working on a few new projects. Not all of them are set here, but some of them could be. I think, the hard part as a filmmaker, and that this is for actors or directors or anything else, is just kind of making sure that you're evolving as you work. And, some of those things, whether it means making a bigger movie or making a different kind of story, there needs to be growth. And I think that could take me other places. I'm open to that as well. But if I can find that kind of growth shooting in the Midwest, I certainly will.
Hope you do.
Where's Poppy asks, in some BTS photos, Cody has words written on his hand. What were those, and how important are your hand notes in your process?
Good question.
Whoa.
Ooh.
Deep cut.
Yeah.
We have some fans here.
Yeah, I'm surprised about someone. So I'm seeing an image of it on my screen. I don't know if other people are or not, but
yeah.
Whenever I shoot, I always write stop, think, choose on my hand. You're a director. At the end of the day, that is your only job, is to stop, get control of yourself, think about whatever the question is asked of you, and you have to make a decision. That is the job description. And if you can't do those 3 things, you have no business on being on set. And I think that, the hard part about directing is everyone has an opinion of how they could have done it or how they would have done it. And it's always after the fact. But what makes you a director is you're the one in the moment making the decision. And it's just that black and white, and you have to make it, and you have to stick to it and keep going. And so I just write that, so that if I'm ever losing myself, I just look down and I have my notes.
That's cool. I like that. I might have to steal that.
I just want to thank Brian, man, for the stunt coordination, because I was so worried about my scene, and you just iced that so easily, man. You know, me and Garland, we went into that situation. You had us so ready.
Yes.
Hell, me and Garland might go in there and just do it for real anyway. You had us so laser focused. By the time the scene came up, it was like nothing.
No, it was great seeing you guys after every take, just getting up and kind of getting your bearings and like, yeah, I'm okay. You guys did, you got, it was all you guys. You made us all look good.
Well, so what they're talking about, for everyone who hasn't seen the film yet, but you should, the two of Curtis and Garland have a pretty big altercation during the movie. And it was, it was a nail biter shooting it. I mean, it was one of those things where you would cut camera and their performance was so hard fought and convincing that everyone on set was silent. And there was this moment of like, I hope to God that they're not actually hurt at the end of this. Thankfully, nobody was, but it was very believable, and it pays off in the scene when you see it.
I felt a lot of pressure as well, because there were certain elements of that scene, hopefully you'll see it, where we only had one chance. You know, we're like,
yes,
we can break this once. So, you know, bring it, you know, and luckily everybody did. You know, there was a little improvisation and change up on the day, but, you know, it was largely, you know, it couldn't have worked out for the better.
Yeah, to that point, there was a lot of, most of the stunts were one-time options, right? We had one mirror to break, we had one windshield to break, we had one car to wreck. I mean, it was all, everyone had to get it right the first time. And so that was something that was always on our mind. And if for some reason that didn't work out, it was also about how do we creatively solve that situation in the moment.
I'm interested in, this is maybe a little lofty, but I'm interested in kind of the political perspective of the film and kind of setting, not in the sense of like Democrat versus Republican, but like we're setting a movie in St. Louis that has a diverse cast that touches on race and poverty and sex work and crime. And I'm wondering if like that was something that was integral to your design, or is just kind of naturally occurred because that's what happens in filmmaking and storytelling regardless, that we reflect our worlds that we see every day. I'm curious, Cody, if that was something that you were aware of or thinking of while you were making this.
I mean, it was something I was certainly, I don't think anyone who's slightly awake in the world now can't think about things like that when they write a story. But I would be wrong to say that I set out to make a political film in any way. And I even down to like, you know, we have this great cast and a diverse cast, but it's because they're all great actors and that's who we found. It wasn't scripted as such. It wasn't said, hey, you know, so-and-so has to be this way or that way. It was really about finding great people. And I think for me, like everything I do, this is not the world I live in. Obviously, I'm not like a criminal and no one in the film is, but the world that I make on screen, I want to feel like the world that I live in to some degree in terms of the faces I see and the types of people I see. And so that was, you know, in casting a big deal for me. But I think that and then allowing all the different people to bring honest elements of themselves to the character is what really made it into something more. Like I said, I think everyone is very kindly saying I set all these things in motion, but I really didn't. I probably just left so many details out that it allowed that you guys filled them in better than I would have. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that when you watch the film. And for me, it's a happy accident. Certainly one that I thought about, but not one that I tried to force a hand of. I think that there's a lot of people who have very important voices and who can speak much more completely to a lot of the social issues that you might see in this film. I don't think I'm definitely not the person who should be speaking politically about those things. What I wanted to make a film about was a film about love and family, and by approaching it with that kind of sincere emotion and allowing each character to have that version of themselves. You know, I think a lot about like everyone has a mom. No matter how bad you are, you have a mom. and if you can think about people in that way, they become much more real than some of the tropes you often see in the genre. And so I tried as much as possible to, when people brought those elements to the character, I was always excited, but also wanted to stay out of the way of that and not influence it too much.
That's great. That's very interesting. I wanted to open up to the actors a little bit and ask if any interesting or funny on-set stories. I'm getting fed some prompts here, but Peter, you were mentioning that you had some, but I'm about a prop gun choice. That's what I want to hear about. How did you choose your gun for your character?
Well, actually, I think Dan gave me that the day that I showed up, but I guess it's sort of it's interesting from an acting standpoint or an insider standpoint. There's a scene in the film where my character has to come in, break into a quick shop with his gun drawn. He's going to use it, and I advanced to the camera, right toward the camera. Normally, if you've got a handgun, why you sight it by looking down the barrel, and you sight it, of course, by looking at the sight at the end of the barrel. So that's what I did in the first take. And Cody, at the end of it, said, "You know something? I know you actually, your sight line is wrong on this." And so I'm looking down the barrel. He said, "Yeah, but it doesn't look right on film. You've got to like raise your eye. Your sight line has to be up from the barrel, which seems all wrong when you're holding the gun in your hand." And so we did the take that way. And when I saw the playback, I saw that he was exactly right. It's interesting because that's the kind of thing you run into, and that's again the mark of a good director. That's the kind of thing that when you don't have much time on a set. And when they tell you that, if the director's able to tell you that, why you can make an immediate adjustment is right. But I don't know. I guess Dan's not still around. But Cody, what was that? It was a 45. It was a model 45 automatic that we had that had it was air controlled, and it popped like 3 times. It had like three good pops in it.
Yeah, I think what I remember from that is, here we are making a movie and everyone's pretending to be big and bad. And oftentimes that could be really unbelievable. But Peter had military experience, and, he at least knew his way around a weapon. And I think the memorable thing from that is, we talked about eye lines, but I also remember you go, "I would have used a revolver. They don't jam." You know what you're talking about. Okay, fine.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. As a drill instructor of mine once said, he said, use a revolver. They're idiot proof.
Yeah.
That's great. And Garland, I have to ask what it was like to be sprinting through the streets of St. Louis in a dirty Santa suit in the middle of the night, presumably without very much street closure, if any. If you got some curious looks from the locals.
I did. Had a few questions as well. I didn't care to answer at that point in time. We went through it. So I just knew I just had to just be exhausted, and I just ran in any direction Cody pointed me in.
Yes. And Natalie, your guys' scene in the front seat of the car, where you're all smushed together, and I'm sure not on a process trailer. That must have been very interesting. I forget who's driving in that scene, but I'm sure that was quite an experience.
Yeah, Frank was actually driving.
Okay.
And as crowded as we look in that scene, I'm not the smallest girl in the world, so we were in that car very, very crowded, literally on top of each other, but it was pretty funny.
It was like a cocktail of like cigarettes, inhalers, peppermint candies, and we're like all elbowing each other. And that car, by the way, which I should let Cody tell the story, but that car's name, our beautiful chariot, is Della Reese. That is the car's actual name. Cody, you should tell them how we got that car.
Yeah, well, we bought the car off the street, and when we went to buy the car, the guy selling it was he loved this car, and he gave us this whole story, which I cannot repeat for a lot of reasons right now, but how I got the name Della Reese, but it's named after the actress Della Reese, and he was so in love with his car, and I love that story so much that we just kept the name. And I just told Frank, like, hey, this is the name of the car, you refer to it. Stitch's big character thing is he just never shuts up. He just kind of fills every empty void with just nonsense talk. And so, you know, there was definitely some room to ad lib. So we just went ahead and leaned into Della Reese as a character. And she unfortunately became one on set because the car never functioned well at all.
That wide shot when we leave the brothel, where it stops for a second because we were so packed like sardines in the front seat that when my character says, "You're hitting me in my side," it's true. It's like the car just slowed down because I couldn't shift gears and we were like stuck. And I'm like, just go with it.
The brakes didn't work well.
Yeah, the brakes didn't work. Pieces of metal
caused a few
hanging out and
delays,
cut
yeah.
you know.
I remember there was one scene where I was like, hey, Frank, that was really good, but you're coming pretty hot out of there. You should hit the brakes, like slow down a little sooner. And I want you to go on the street. And he goes, I was pushing as hard as I can.
The car wasn't slowing down.
So thankfully, that was the last day of Della Reese shooting. And we were able at the end of production to give it back to the rightful owner, who I think was very happy about that.
That's great. Anne from the audience has a question for Gil. How do you find your inner bad guy?
Oh man, I think you know, I think every bad guy thinks that you know, he doesn't think he's a bad guy, you know, and I think that's the key. Is like in my view, I wasn't, you know, I had, you know, Alex, who's the love of my life, and there's no way this guy's gonna come out and get her back, and it's just, yeah, just finding the determination into just pursuing my goals, and this guy's not gonna, you know, I'm gonna defend this with all my life, and this guy's gonna go down. And that's what I loved about the film. Has such a great ending, because you think I'm gonna get I shouldn't say anything about it. But, it doesn't end as we think. But yeah, the inner bad guy of the last few days, I've been trying to save this little freaking mockingbird I found at the side of the road. And it's like, oh, yeah, man, if the audience only knew how this bad guy is.
One of the nicest guys on set.
Gil, I didn't get your story from you about how you ended up a part of this film. Can you talk about joining the team and how coming to St. Louis and your experience of making this film?
Yeah, it's funny, is like, because everyone always, it's really strange for me when, what I said before, I put myself on tape and then didn't think much about it, and then suddenly, yeah, I got the invite to go, and I look back in my auditions. Oh, cool! I love this. I remember loving this script, and then because everyone asked me, hey, you know, because they think I have an accent, right? And now to us, like, we speak, I think I speak the Queen's English, and you guys have all the accents. And so everyone always asks me, so where are you from? Where are you from? I said, Kansas City, and no one's ever been to Kansas City. Right? So oh, okay. It's like, and here I am going to Missouri. Right. So it's like going home. But no, I think the lovely thing about the film was that it was a family. You know, you instantly felt like being part of this great family, and I had no idea that these guys had worked together, what they'd done before. But I was just embraced, and it was just a beautiful sense. And one great thing too is, like, as soon as I got there, I had to put myself on tape for Lethal Weapon, and I asked Lockie and I think some of the guys, hey, and Frank, I said, hey, can we shoot this scene? Have you got time there's a break to shoot the scene? So my audition for Lethal Weapon was beautifully shot. Man, it was no way in hell. And I got that job straight after this. So I went to go into Lethal Weapon after this.
That's great.
There's no way I was going to get this after all their help and having these guys read it to me. Oh my God, here's my little, why are you so wet? Here's my little puppy.
Nice.
But yeah, it was also just an awesome experience.
That's great. I have a question from M. Azam Khan. Cody, what's your best advice about directing actors, and actors, if there was any particular direction that really helped you on set? I mean, we've talked about kind of the environment in general, but if anyone has any more specific, something specific to add, but Cody, we'll start with you.
So I mean, I'll just talk about how I direct. I don't know if it's the best way to do it, but I make sure that when I'm auditioning with people that I don't look for the performance I want in an audition. I make sure that I'm pushing in different directions just to see what people are comfortable with and if I connect to them as people. And then there's a lot of that preparatory conversation. I'm also very big on, maybe this is just my background from like as an editor and a DP as well, like early on, but I think a lot about like my framing and whatnot, and I communicate that a lot with actors because I think that matters to their performance as well. But we have a lot of that early conversation. And then when we get on set, it's really about, for me, staying out of the way. It's like letting, I'm very specific about maybe blocking or whatever. And if something's not feeling right, we can adapt to that. But I try to just, then when we get on set, give room for the performance to happen, especially in indie when you're shooting as fast as you are. You have to trust those early takes and trust the preparation that goes into that. And I try to only give direction if it's something that I need from a technical standpoint, or if I, for some reason, felt something could be different from like I'm watching the edit as I'm directing. So sometimes I'm like, hey, I might need this variety to cut to something I knew we shot earlier. But for the most part, I just try to cast correctly and then trust actors to do that and kind of speak as minimally to them as possible in terms of telling them anything that I think they need to do differently.
I'm expanding on something that someone from the audience, Josh Guffey, mentioned, but everyone in this movie has a lot of chemistry and intimacy and history. And I'm just, if there's any kind of method or how do you go about creating that in such a short timeline? And I'd love to open that up to the actors as well. I'll maybe ask Lexi, since you have also lots of different relationships to juggle as well in this film, both obviously with Nolan and with Donnie, but also even with Monty and your husband's kind of guys, and then also with the child actor that you were working with. Can you talk about creating intimacy and history with someone on a short timeline?
Well, I was actually just thinking about Destiny, who plays Amy.
She's in the movie as well.
Oh man, and she was just such a treat because she is such a rare gift as a young actor, that she was really keen and really with it, but also not super like hyperly over manicured. And so therefore it was much easier to like create a natural relationship, because you just, as I think people maybe who have children or have spent a lot of time with them, you just treat them like normal. They'll just be normal. So that was really easy for me to get in with her, because she was just sort of a lovely child and we spent a little time together. And obviously there's a lot of, it's sort of like any relationship you have with another actor, you say like, I'm gonna, at this moment, is it okay if I hold you, or I hold your hand, or I touch you here, or I touch your hair, or whatever? It's the same thing. And she was just very open to that and just a sweet individual. And then, yeah, I was actually just remembering that I feel like I shot maybe, it's hard to remember because they were all nights. But a scene in which I confront Gil's character, and then I also have a scene with Nolan that both of them were very intimate, physically and otherwise, and I kind of felt like, the town bicycle in that moment, where it's like, whew, jumping from one man right into the next. But it's really like, it was a really lovely, safe set, and the actors were so careful with each other, and there's just an easier rapport, despite the fact that some of us had barely met beforehand or spoken. There was just a mutual respect and warmth there. Ironically, the person I knew best, Frank, I have no scenes with. Yeah, but yeah, it was just super easy to volley between those things.
That's great. Thanks everybody. I think we might wrap up here. I'd love to go through one more time and have everybody say your name again and what character you play and where we can find you on social media and what else we can see you in or what you have next coming up. I know we're all kind of uncertainly out of work right now, but I hope everyone is hanging in. But Frank, will you start us off saying goodbye?
Yeah, so thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. I was one of the producers on this, and I play the role of Stitches. I'm working on a feature right now that I'm trying to get made. It's a 1970s dramatic thriller that I wrote, The Labor of Love. I've been trying to get out there and get financing, but since it's a period piece, it's a big one. And then on the acting front, I just acted in a movie about the cannabis industry in Northern California. So now that was just starting to hit the circuit, the fest circuit, when the virus pandemic kind of took over. And so it's still kind of getting out there and playing, but hopefully it'll be out toward the end of the year. It's called Freeland. So.
Great. Brian, where can we find you either on social media or what do you have next up?
I am, currently, once we get past the quarantine, we'll be hoping to finish Fargo season 4. I'm assisting with the stunts on that. I'm not the stunt coordinator, but and also finishing up the Dick Wolf Show, Chicago Fire, Med, and PD. And my Instagram handle is that guy we let hang out with us. My wife made it.
Great. And Michael, how about you?
Thank you again to everybody for showing up. Actually, just before the quarantine hit, wrapped another feature film called New Year. I guess if you want to see pictures of my dog, at Loxy on Instagram. Still doing commercials and still working here in LA. And yeah.
Curtis, how about you?
I just finished just finished a project with Josh Godfrey, who came in and asked a question called All Gone Wrong. Another action thriller, really good film. And I own a couple barbershops. You can find me on Instagram at Cuts by Curtis. And I'll let you guys know I'm also running for committee man in my ward in August. So
nice.
Trying to stay involved in the neighborhood and in the community and, do what they say, lead by example out here.
That's great.
That's great. That's amazing. Natalie, how about you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all the things at Natalie. It's just my name, Nattaliee. I'm the only Natalie out there. I actually just got done. I do a lot of musical theater, so I was playing the roles of Aretha Franklin and Nina Simone in a biopiece musical that's about Janis Joplin, but the African American influences she had. And I'm also in the process of filming a documentary about runners who are plus sized. And I had an ultra marathon. I was supposed to run 50 miles. This is the second time it's been canceled. The pandemic canceled this next one. So I literally can't finish this documentary until I run this 50-mile race. So I'm now waiting till all this subsides so I can do that. And I'm hoping to get that in the festival circuit.
That's great. And Peter, how about you?
It was great getting together with you all again, seeing your faces even remotely. I'm in a new comedy series that's premiering May 1st on a new streaming network called Urban Flex. The show is called Casting the Net. It's a satire about Hollywood. So please, any of you who are so inclined, please sign up for Urban Flex and tune in to Casting the Net. And after that, Curtis and I both did Josh's movie he referred to, All Gone Wrong. That was supposed to come out later this summer, and we'll see what happens with that. So anyway, thank you all.
Great. Thank you. And Gil, how about you?
Yeah, ditto to what Peter said. It's so great to see all you guys, even if it is remotely. What a wonderful experience. I'm Gil Darnell, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm meant to be doing a beautiful little story in Arizona. We were meant to be like probably next week, I think. So it's been pushed till September. So finally, I'm playing like a normal person, like a struggling artist. How am I going to do that? And but yeah, so that's a beautiful story. And then another film where I'm back to gangster mode in shooting in Turkey and Lithuania. We've shot 1 week already, but it's probably going to be shooting in October.
Cool.
So yeah, so great, awesome to see all you guys.
And Gil, how's your bird doing?
Oh man, it passed away. We lost her last night.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry to hear that.
Worst. Oh, I was looking forward to she's like part of the family, you know. I was looking forward to releasing her into the wild, and oh man, it was just even the puppy cried.
Oh,
sorry, man.
Yeah.
Lexi, how about you? Where can we find you, and what else do you have coming up?
Well, again, very happy to be here. I love Cody Stokes. I do. I think we all do. I made a couple of things this last year. One is a US Mexico dual production, which was really wonderful, called Son of Monarchs, that should be hopefully done. And I think maybe we kind of missed, because so many festivals got canceled. I think we might be rolling over to the next one, hopefully, on that. And then I shot another movie with Frank.
We're contractually obligated, I think, was the last I heard, to work with each other.
Yeah, if this was like the studio system, you would have to do everything together. But yeah, that is a very cool sort of paranoid thriller, sort of pseudo horror film called They Want Me Gone, in which we get to do some fun. I get to do some stunts this time, so that was good. And yeah, that's the latest and the greatest for me. So.
Nice.
Oh, and I'm not really on anything.
Oh, okay. Oh, good for you. And Garland, how about you?
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And it was great seeing all of you. I had such a great time working with you all. And this is a very special project, and I'm very proud of it. Over the past year, I finished a sci-fi film, Beneath the Green. It should be coming out later. Either early next year or depending on when the whole COVID thing clears up. And a short film called Scarecrow, which is currently available as well. You can find me at The Garland Scott on Instagram.
Garland, how's the comic book going?
Oh, I have that too. I have a lot of things. It's going really well. I'm working on the next chapter. So we'll see. Yeah.
That's great. And Cody, you can take us out.
Sure. Well, again, I'll echo, thank you all for joining. It means a lot to have you guys come back and talk positively about the film without us bending your arm too hard. And it's obviously a really big thrill. To have worked so hard with all the people involved, and there's many, many, many people beyond who we have on screen here today, as we know. But everyone put something into this film, and it's really, really shows on screen and really made it special. And so for it to be on Netflix, it's on Netflix now. You can go watch it right now. It's available. It will be for next year, at least the next year. That means a lot. It's years of work come to fruition. And for anyone watching this doesn't have Netflix, the film's available on other platforms where transactional. You can rent it, buy it. You can buy a DVD if that's how you roll. Whatever you want to do, you can have it on your shelf. So really, that's
physical media.
Yeah, physical media. Yeah. So that's kind of the highlight of things for me. And then, other than that, I have a number of projects, as we all do, between commercials this past year or so. Michael, myself, and the producing team on this have been working on a feature-length documentary about Walt Disney and the Winter Olympics, which is very off topic compared to this, but is interesting. And I have a couple other features in early stages right now that are narrative. And so for me, it's just about working as much as I can and trying to tell good stories. And this one was a real pleasure to get to tell with all these people. So go check it out on Netflix.
Thanks, guys. And The Ghost Who Walks is available on Netflix right now. And please make sure and watch it and rate it and review it and post about it and tell your friends about it. It really, really helps independent films like this to build word of mouth. So I know that everyone here would appreciate that. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, Chad.
Hey, thank you, Chad.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.